Prosecco's been especially brave during COVID. I remember when almost all regions of the world started pulling funds away because there was a lot of uncertainty. We didn't know what was going to happen in the world. Prosecco was the only client that had a double down on marketing activities. And they said, we know that now there's nothing in person anymore. Everybody's going to be buying wine on e-commerce. So we shifted all of our budgets toward digital communication. We worked with a lot of influencers. We did a lot of virtual classes, and we partnered with a lot of e-commerces in the United States, especially wine.com. We built a digital infrastructure that helped the denomination, and it lifted off those years.
Hello, welcome to Masterclass US Wine Market with me, your host, Juliana Colangelo. This show has been designed to demystify the U.S. market for Italian wineries through interviews with experts in sales and distribution, social media, communications, and so much more. We will quiz each of our esteemed guests in every episode to solidify the lessons that we've learned from the episode. So sharpen your pencils, get out your notebooks, and join us this week to learn more about the U.S. market. Hello, welcome back to Masterclass US Wine Market on the Italian Wine Podcast. Today we're diving into one of the most important and often misunderstood tools available to Italian wine regions and producers looking to grow in the United States, OCM funding. Join me today is who I would call one of the experts in OCM funding and campaigns, Luca Venturelli from Colangelo Partners. Luca is an expert in international wine promotion and a longtime advisor to Italian wine regions, consortia, and institutions on how to strategically deploy OCM funding in export markets to increase brand awareness and sales. Most recently, Luca has worked closely with regions such as Prosecco DOC, Chianti Classico, and Sicilia DOC that are definitely growing their market share in the US. So clearly the work he's doing is working. So today we'll explore more about how regions, but also brands can use OCM funding more effectively in the US and what actually works. Luca, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here. Of course, you're a close friend of the VIA community and the podcast, but it's great to have you officially on air for an interview.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. So for our listeners who might not know you, Luca, tell us a little bit about how you made your way from your hometown of Verona and also the home offices of In Italy here to Midtown Manhattan, New York City.
So I actually started working about 11 years ago in Verona, where I'm from, with Stevie Kim at Vinili International. So I'm very familiar with the Italian Wine Podcast, the Vinili International Academy Network. And that's where I first met Gino Colangelo. It was about 2014, 2015. I was working with Stevie organizing the events of Vinili abroad, mostly Hong Kong, Russia. And then, we were working a lot at the Vinili event in Verona. After that, I joined another winery in Valpolicella. And I realized the importance of the US market. I was always fascinated by the US market. I reached out to Gino to start developing a program for a few brands that I was handling here in the United States. And after, a few conversations, negotiations, Gino essentially offered me a job here in New York. And I think I accepted in a blink of an eye. I remember driving home and I already called my mom and I said, I think I'm going to go to New York. So this was 2018 and I've been here ever since.
Wow, that's amazing. Very serendipitous then. So it wasn't something you had really intently planned on of coming to the US, but something that came about more opportunistically, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I was always passionate about this. I remember, in fact, when I was in Canada studying 15 years ago, I told my professor that my dream one day would be to promote Italian wine abroad. I was named Italian wine because I was the only guy bringing bottles, in a student hall where everybody was coming with boxed wine. I was bringing with bottles of Italian wine, and that's where I got labeled the wine guy, and that's where it all started.
Yeah, and we tend to kind of come back around to our initial passions in life, so that's a pretty cool story. So, Luca, today for our listeners, I'm sure everyone is very eager when they hear the 3 letters OCM to learn from you about how this funding works, how to use it better. So we're very eager for today's conversation for a few key reasons. And what we're going to focus on is, number one, how to design regional marketing programs that actually resonate first and foremost with the U.S. trade, but also the consumer to drive growth. Number two, some of the most effective channels and activities for promoting Italian wine regions in the U.S. And finally, some of the most common mistakes to avoid when allocating OCM budgets and measuring success. So let's start off with the fundamentals. Luca, what do you think a well-structured regional marketing campaign should look like in the US?
So, a well-structured campaign starts with clarity. Regions need to have a clear objective of what they're going to do. They need to understand who are their priority audiences, what messages they want to convey to them. And they also need to understand what's the strategy in terms of showing up in front of them. How many times do they want to come up in the market? They also need to figure out, how do I measure success, which isn't just I need to sell more wine in the short term. They need to understand what's their long-term strategy.
Right.
That's essential to allocate OCM funding. As you know, OCM allows you to decide between different types of activities. That mix of activities is going to affect the way that you're perceived, especially here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that they need to research right away is, how does the product of this region fit in the US market? How positioned are we? Are we a premium product? Are we a niche product? Are we emerging? And they need to ask those questions to themselves, and they need to be realistic about it. They need to understand, who's my competition, the real competition. Not if I sell a $20 bottle, my competition cannot be a $60 bottle just because it's a neighboring appellation in Italy, right?
Right.
They need to be very clear about these. And then after that, they can start designing the mix of activities.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's use an example of a region and a category that's been remarkably successful in the US in recent years is Prosecco. How do you think the category positioned itself successfully in the US market to accomplish the double-digit market growth that it's seen?
Yes, Prosecco has been particularly successful because they were able to successfully integrate all these marketing activities, marketing and communication activities. They were able to focus on trade education, especially in the beginning when people didn't know about Prosecco, to explain the appellation, why it was created, what does it entail, the method of production, where it comes from. Because, again, there's a lot of misconception. In a market that's this vast, it's difficult to control education. So they started with that. They focused a lot on that. And then they slowly started integrating media relations, events, a lot of events. And then now they're shifting towards digital communication. Most of us are on social media all the time, and that's
Right.
where you need to communicate. So Prosecco's been especially brave during COVID. I remember when almost all regions of the world started pulling funds away because there was a lot of uncertainty. We didn't know what was going to happen in the world. Prosecco was the only client that had a double down
Right.
on marketing activities. And they said, we know that now there's nothing in person anymore, but everybody's going to be buying wine on e-commerce. So we shifted all of our budgets towards digital communication. We worked with a lot of influencers. We did a lot of virtual classes, and we partnered with a lot of e-commerces in the United States, especially wine.com. We built a digital infrastructure that helped the denomination, and it lifted off those years.
Amazing. Yeah. So, like you said, I think just to recap with success with Prosecco, starting with the trade, educating them to understand your product, then moving to the media to get awareness and build credibility, build a reputation, and then more consumer centric driven direct marketing tactics like e-commerce.
Yes.
And as you said in the beginning too, really a integrated approach as well, and kind of tying everything together.
And a lot of events.
Events,
That's fundamental. A lot of events, a lot of in-person events we did in the beginning, especially. And we were going around the country with this initiative that we created, National Prosecco Week in 2018, where we concentrate all the activities that a normal region would do in a given year. We would do all of that in one single week. So creating a big buzz around the country, engaging with all the tiers of the industry, from importers, distributors, retailers, and restaurants, and then, of course, consumers.
Right. Yeah, and I think that that's a great example too. If we think about a great example from the spirits world of Campari Week, or Negroni Week, I should say, in September, right? Having a key pivotal moment of the year and repeating it year after year after year, so that trade, media, consumers, expect and get used to the concept of the event, I think is a really effective way to build that continuity. So, Luca, you mentioned, with Prosecco, one of the first things is education and getting the trade to understand your brand positioning. So, talk to us a little bit about what types of messaging activities work the best for, let's say, a smaller region or brand that's looking to come to the US and target the trade. How should they think about that? How should they think about first getting to the trade and then next what they should be presenting and saying to the trade?
So when we talk about education of the trade and presenting any given region, emerging, even consolidating United States, right now they need to start simplifying the language. We're getting into a war where attention is always more difficult to get. At the same time, we have all these denominations that are becoming overly complex. So one of the mistakes I see is that they come here and they try to explain everything at once, which becomes overwhelming, and that loses the attention of the audience here. So one of the things that we need to do is to start simplifying, which doesn't mean we don't need to talk about our assets in terms of complexity of denomination. But instead, if we're coming for a session like a master educational masterclass in the market, maybe we focus on one or two of those aspects only. And we try to capture the audience with those two things. And then maybe after the masterclass, we sparked enough interest for them to go research and discover more about the rest. If we
Right.
try to give them 2,000 years of information, it's going to overwhelm them and we're not going to achieve our goal. Our goal
Right.
is to train these people. And what I want to see when people leave the room is that are they interested in the region? Did they understand anything about the region? That's our goal. If we get that, then naturally they will be passionate about it. They will want more. And that's when, we can come the following year or even 6 months later with another session, explain different things. And then over
Right.
time, over a long time, because these programs need to be built over time. There's no 1 year is going to change it
Mhm.
all. It's you need to build 3 to 5 years. That's your time horizon. You come back and you cover all of those things. So then after 3 years, you've given enough information and the trade is able to absorb and to put the pieces together and become your ambassadors here in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and what you just said there, that last piece, become your ambassadors, right? The trade are your gatekeepers. They open the doors to the consumer. They determine what goes on lists, what goes on shelves. So they're really the first and foremost audience. But let's talk a little bit more specifically, Luca, when it comes to trade education, about even just the logistics and the format. Are we looking at a masterclass classroom style? Are we looking at a dinner? What types of just like physical activities do you think have been most effective in recent years as we see this sort of new generation of trade, younger sommeliers, younger buyers coming into positions of purchasing power?
So it depends. The United States are a huge market. So one of the things people think it's like I'm going to United States and they treat it like one market, but we're dealing with a reality that's bigger than Europe. It's 50 states, and each state has different traditions, different habits, different distribution.
Right.
We have major hubs like New York, San Francisco, Chicago, LA, where you can find pretty much all the wines of the world. But then when you start venturing to, what we call the secondary markets, tertiary markets, it becomes a little bit more difficult than that. So while in these big markets like New York, you can have large events where you can do big walk around tastings with, hundreds of producers. You can do classroom style master classes focusing on peculiarities of very interesting and unknown wines. When you go to secondary markets, you need to focus more on basics. So yes, it needs to be educational, maybe master classes, but it could also be wine dinners just to get the trade familiar, to also show the pairings. That's something very interesting to do. And people are interested in that. They need to know what they can consume wine with. And then it overall depends on who your target audience is going to be. If you're trying to target younger generations, you probably have to come up with something different. We're seeing, the younger generations, they tend to break a little bit with the tradition, and they don't want to do the boring stuff. And that's what they believe it's boring that previous generations used to do. They want to have a different approach to wine. It's more fun. So we're now trying out things where we have all these people in the industry who are like under 40, and instead of doing an educational class, maybe we just try to bring some wines, go to a wine bar, make it very casual, informal, have the winemakers there and have them connect organically. So then they can discuss, they can grab a glass of wine, they can chat together, get to know each other. And that's a more human way. That's a more human approach that younger generations have to wine.
Right.
I think the trick is just to try things, try to be authentic and make things fun.
Yeah, and also what I'm hearing from you too is be intentionally specific based on the region you're going to. So if you're going to be out in California, there's a different type of trade and different culture than New York, right? New York, you have, like
Yeah.
you said, every wine, every region in the world represented. There's a lot of competition, but there's also a lot of openness to exploring things that are esoteric and unique and different. And California or the West Coast, where they have a lot of domestic wine, you have to think about, okay, this is coming out and selling ice to an igloo, as we say in the US when we're going to California, especially Northern California, to sell imported wine. So how do I stand out? Does my wine belong in this program and this list? And being, very intentional, I think, like you said, about coming up with programming that will resonate, be authentic to you and your region or you as a producer, but also really relate and resonate to your audience.
Exactly. In some states, you might just have to work with distributors because they're the ones who are going to educate the trade. They're the ones who are going to educate restaurants and retailers on why to buy this particular wine that they hadn't seen before. So it really depends on the maturity of the market that you're trying to target. There's no one measure that fits all. You need to be very specific. You need to do a lot of research. You need to have a clear idea where you're going and what you're going to do.
Right, absolutely. And for our listeners that are sitting in Italy that might have not that much experience in the US market, where should they start? What kind of people should they talk to? Of course, besides yourself. But what type of partners and people should they be talking to figure out and answer these questions and come up with a strategy for marketing a region?
And again, even there, it depends on the product, depends on the product they have and where they want to be. What's their goal? What's their objective? Do I want to be a niche product that only the elite of the industry talks about, or do I want to be a product that's accessible for the average consumer? Those things are very important. They also determine whether you're going to start from a market or another. Of course, New York is the entry point of all wine, but it's not the only market. We're seeing a lot of producers that are now targeting different markets because they claim New York is too crowded, it's too competitive. So they start reaching out to importers in Montana, in Minnesota, or in Colorado, and they start building the nomination from there, which is something pretty odd we didn't see before. It used to start on the East Coast and then a little bit on the West Coast. And from there, it was, Texas after, Illinois, the Midwest, and it was, going towards the inside of the country. Now we're seeing different things. There's producers taking different approaches. We don't know yet what will work or what not. We're experiencing this as we speak. But I think in the years to come, we'll probably see new ideas coming up because the wine industry needs this. It's alive.
Absolutely.
I don't know if we want to do this again. I feel like I was just rambling.
Right. It's adapting and evolving. Can you give us an example, Luca, perhaps a favorite recent activity promotion that was specifically targeted to the trade that you felt was particularly successful and why?
So there's two types of activities that I feel they're particularly successful. The traditional walk around tasting, I know that sometimes we have a lot of regions say, but it's always the same thing. And I understand that. But with wine, you need to put the producers in front of the trade. There needs to be a personal component. So it's very simple. You need one producer, one buyer, and you need a bottle of wine. You need to put these three elements together. The most simple way to do this is to have this walk around tasting. And then that's where you invite everybody. It also allows the trade to exchange ideas between themselves. It also allows importers to observe how do sommeliers treat these wines. Because if you go to one of these tastings and you see sommeliers going crazy about a specific wine, a specific producer, importers, they observe this. And if they see an opportunity, they try to seize it. They're there to make money. So I think that this is a very successful format that needs to stay. We tried a few things And one thing that I'm particularly proud of is try to build the denominations from within. And that's going back to what I was saying before. Younger generations, they tend to break a little bit with tradition. They don't like when it's a infomercial educational session held by a
Right.
consortium about their wines. They know they're going to talk about their wines in a way that's these are the greatest wines in the world. They already know what to expect, but they want a more genuine approach to that. So what we've been doing, we've been
Okay.
taking people to Italy to visit these regions. They learn, they experience, they
Okay.
get to meet the people. And then we ship them a lot of bottles of that wine. And we ask them to organize dinners with their
After the
friends,
trip.
with peers. So sommeliers,
Okay.
calling other soms and just having dinners, where everybody brings a bottle and then just discuss about that and collect feedback and see how that works. That way we remove, that infomercial part
Right. The formality.
because they're not trying to sell that wine. They're just trying to understand, is this a good wine? How do we fit this into our wine list? How can I make this by the glass or not? And they discuss these things between psalms. And we're seeing this particularly successful because it creates genuine interest. And then we have all these psalms coming back to us asking if they can go to visit the region. So
Amazing.
that I'm particularly proud of. We've been doing it for the past few years, and I
Okay.
think it's part of the future. But of course, this depends on the wine that you have. Not all wines are meant to end up in a top restaurant wine list. So it really depends on the product that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's a really great example of also building ambassadorship, right? You take a group, you invest to take a group of targeted buyers over to your region and educate them, physically see the land, the region, understand the history, get into all the technical aspects and walk away as ambassadors. But then that follow through, right? What do you do after the trip? Well, like you said, you're sending them wine to educate their friends. And, in the trade, especially in the younger sommelier community, a lot of social gatherings and people hanging out together, learning together, tasting together. So I think I love that example because it's also not overly complicated, right? I think that's something that to share with our listeners also is these don't have to be the most overly complex strategies. Sometimes simple is better. And a lot of times
Exactly.
getting information and then getting liquid to lips and follow up, right? And follow through. So that's a really great example. So let's turn next to a little more with OCM, some of the technical sides of things. As we know, it's a complex tool to use. What are some of the most common mistakes you see Italian wine regions making when they are deploying OCM funding in the US for campaigns?
So there are a lot of mistakes. I want to point out that we're not trying to crucify consortia here because, of course, they have to deal with what they're given. So there's a structural problem sometimes that come maybe from the European Union on the limits on how you can use these funds.
Right.
And the problem is that you have very strict categories and sometimes very little room to maneuver. One of the things that I've seen in the past is, for instance, when you have a consortium that only advertises on a couple of publications and that's it. And for them, that's a strategy for the US market. A couple of pages on a couple of publications, and they're hoping that that's marketing and communicating to the US market without any in-market activity, without any strategy or incoming or anything like that. So putting all the eggs in one single basket, even when budgets are very tight,
Right.
that's a big mistake. Sometimes we see these trade shows where they participate, maybe with one of the regional bars where you have the wines, but there's no producers. There's not even maybe a representative from the consortium, and they just hire some just to be present. That unfortunately isn't enough. Unless that wine bar is a wine bar of world-class wines that everybody already knows, if you're an emerging denomination, you need to come to the market. This market, we know it's very expensive, but it can give a lot of return. Sometimes there's these master classes, these tastings we were talking about before, where they just overwhelm people with information. And again, there's no real strategy there. They just come to the market because we have to go. We have $10,000 in events. So what do? We can't do a walk-around tasting. Let's just do a master class. And that's where I'm like, why don't we just explore a different idea? Why don't we just ask a song to host a dinner at their place?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Cost you less, and maybe you're actually going to achieve a lot more because you have somebody who's going to speak generally about those wines.
Right.
Another big mistake is changing the strategy every year. Consistency is the key here. As you said before, you need to think in terms of 3-5 years at least, at the very minimum. But you come one year with an event, then the following year you only do media relations, then the following year only digital marketing. There's no consistency. You're going to lose the attention of the audience. Or when you rotate international markets, and again, we do understand that consortia cannot advertise or market everywhere in the world. They need to choose, they need to make choices.
Of course.
But a market like United States, if you come for 1 year and then you disappear for 3, people are going to forget you. Here, you have too much competition. You have regions from all over the world coming every year, multiple times a year. If you miss out for a couple of years, you're going to be left behind. So yeah, this is pretty much what I see. Sometimes also producers, like, they're not trained to approach a market. That's a big mistake, because there's this misconception that the consortium must do everything for the producers. But the consortium creates the platform for the producers. Then it's all on the producers to create the market. They're the ones who actually need to do active research before coming to the United States. They need to know, who are the importers I want to talk to? Who are the distributors or retailers? What am I going to do in the week that I'm going there for the event? It's not just the event that the consortium organizes. It's everything around it. The event is just a small portion of the mission. So sometimes it's this misconception, and they come maybe for a couple of days, do an event, they go back, and then there's no follow-up. Nothing is structured, and they blame the consortium. So
yeah. I can tell you thought a lot about this answer, Luca. You had a lot of useful information to say, and I want to just recap it. So common mistakes to avoid. First of all, you have to be consistent. Don't just come once and do one event and expect it to be effective. You have to have a 3 to 5 year plan and be consistent in the market with the strategy. And if that means picking 3 states and honing in on a specific region of the US, that could be a great strategy. You also have to be here physically and not rely on people that have never even been to your region to be promoting. Don't put all your eggs in one basket and only focus on like one activity. Mix it up and have different activities happening together, so you're reaching different audiences. And for the producers that are participating in the consortia, do your own homework and don't expect the consortia to do everything for you. So all really good, great examples. So anything else you might add? Anything I missed?
I mean, there's a lot more, right, that we can talk about. I guess I can stay here for hours. If I can think of something else, I'll let you know.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, Luca, as we start winding down, we'll do our rapid fire quiz we do at the end of every episode. So if you can do your best to answer these questions in just one sentence.
Okay.
Question number 1, what is your number 1 tip for mastering the U.S. wine market?
You need to be consistent and think long term.
Great answer. Number 2, what is something you might have told your younger professional self about marketing wine in the U.S.?
The brand building takes a lot of time, but that's okay. You need to be patient.
Be patient. Yes, it's a good one. And finally, what is your favorite travel hack when you're traveling back and forth between Italy and other regions for work?
So I put all my business cards in the blazers that I'm going to wear over all those days. And I do when I pack.
Oh, that's a new one.
I'm sure that I don't run out of business cards or I left them behind.
Oh, yeah, I like that one. Pre-pack the business cards in the jacket. That's great. Yes. That's a good tip. All right, Luca, thank you so much for joining me today. How can our listeners connect with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn with Luca Venturelli, or you can shoot me an email at lventurelli@colangelopr.com.
Okay, amazing. Thank you again, Luca.
Thank you, Juliana. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for joining me today. Stay tuned each week for new episodes of Masterclass US Wine Market with me, Juliana Colangelo. And remember, if you've enjoyed today's show, hit the like and follow buttons wherever you get your podcasts.